The War of Jenkins Ear, 1739-1748, was a conflict between Britain and Spain that erupted over a seemingly minor incident involving the mutilation of a British merchant captain, Robert Jenkins. This incident, combined with broader geopolitical tensions and colonial ambitions, ultimately led to a war that had far-reaching consequences in the context of European power struggles and colonial expansion. In the early 18th century, the rivalry between Britain and Spain was intense, fueled by their competing interests in trade and colonial expansion in the Americas. Spain, intent on protecting its lucrative American territories, sought to control and limit British trade in the region. British merchants, on the other hand, were eager to expand their trade networks and often engaged in smuggling to circumvent Spanish restrictions. The specific incident that gave the war its name occurred in 1731, when the Spanish Coast Guard intercepted a British merchant ship, the Rebecca, commanded by Captain Robert Jenkins. The Spanish captain, Juan de Leon Fandino, accused Jenkins of smuggling and ordered his ship to be searched. During the confrontation, Fandino allegedly cut off Jenkins' ear and told him to present it to his king as a warning. Jenkins reportedly kept the severed ear and later displayed it before the British Parliament as evidence of Spanish atrocities. Although the incident itself was relatively minor, it became a powerful symbol of Spanish aggression and British humiliation. Tensions between the two nations had been simmering for years due to ongoing disputes over trade rights and territorial claims in the Americas. The Jenkins Ear incident provided the British government with a tangible example of Spanish mistreatment of British subjects, which they used to galvanize public opinion and justify military action. In 1739, after years of diplomatic wrangling and increasing hostilities, Britain declared war on Spain. The initial phase of the conflict focused on naval engagements and privateering in the Caribbean and along the Spanish Main. British privateers, authorized by the government, attacked Spanish ships and coastal settlements, seeking to disrupt Spanish trade and weaken their hold on their American colonies. One of the earliest and most significant actions of the war was the British assault on the Spanish port of Portobello, modern-day Portobello, Panama, in November 1739. Admiral Edward Vernon led a fleet of 6 ships in a daring attack on the fortified town, achieving a decisive victory. The capture of Portobello was celebrated in Britain and hailed as a major triumph, boosting public support for the war and enhancing Vernon's reputation. Buoyed by this success, the British launched further expeditions against Spanish possessions in the Caribbean. In 1740, they attempted to capture the strategic city of Cartagena de Indias in present-day Colombia, one of Spain's most important colonial strongholds. The British assembled a large fleet and an army of nearly 30,000 men, including colonial troops and sailors. However, the siege of Cartagena, led by Admiral Vernon and General Thomas Wentworth, ended in disaster. The British forces were repelled by the Spanish defenders, commanded by the capable General Blas de Lezo. The campaign was plagued by disease, logistical difficulties, and strong resistance, resulting in heavy British casualties and a humiliating defeat. Despite setbacks in the Caribbean, the war continued on other fronts. In Europe, the conflict became entangled with the larger War of the Austrian Succession, 1740-1748, a complex struggle involving multiple European powers. The war over Jenkins' Ear merged into this broader conflict, with Britain and Spain finding themselves on opposite sides of a wider coalition of alliances. In North America, the war had significant implications for the colonial balance of power. Both Britain and Spain sought to strengthen their positions and expand their territories. British forces targeted Spanish Florida, launching several expeditions to capture key settlements such as St. Augustine. However, these efforts met with limited success, and the strategic importance of Florida remained contested. The war also extended to the Pacific, where British and Spanish naval forces clashed over control of key trading routes and colonial outposts. The British sought to disrupt Spanish commerce and weaken their influence in the region, while the Spanish aimed to protect their valuable possessions and maintain their dominance. Throughout the conflict, both sides suffered from the logistical challenges of waging war across vast distances and difficult terrain. Disease, harsh weather conditions, and supply shortages took a heavy toll on the troops and sailors involved, leading to high casualty rates and prolonged campaigns. By the early 1740s, the war had reached a stalemate, with neither side able to achieve a decisive victory. The focus of the conflict shifted increasingly towards Europe, where the War of the Austrian Succession raged on. The British government, faced with mounting costs and strategic priorities elsewhere, sought to bring an end to the hostilities with Spain. The Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, signed in 1748, formally ended the War of Jenkins Ear and the War of the Austrian Succession. Under the terms of the treaty, both Britain and Spain agreed to restore captured territories and return to the pre-war status quo. The treaty did not address the underlying issues that had sparked the conflict, but it provided a temporary respite from the fighting. The War of Jenkins Ear had significant long-term consequences for both Britain and Spain. For Britain, the war highlighted the importance of naval power and the need to protect its growing empire. The conflict also underscored the challenges of waging war in distant and inhospitable regions, prompting reforms in military strategy and logistics. For Spain, the war exposed the vulnerabilities of its colonial empire and the difficulties of defending its far-flung territories. The conflict also strained Spain's resources and weakened its position in the Americas, contributing to the gradual decline of Spanish dominance in the region. In the broader context of European history, the War of Jenkins Ear was a precursor to the larger conflicts of the mid-18th century, including the 7 Years' War, 1756-1763. It demonstrated the interconnectedness of European and colonial affairs and the ways in which local incidents could escalate into wider geopolitical struggles. The war also left a lasting legacy in popular culture and historical memory. The dramatic story of Captain Jenkins and his severed ear became a symbol of British resolve and the brutal realities of colonial competition. The conflict remains a fascinating episode in the history of Anglo-Spanish relations and a reminder of the complex interplay between national interests, personal grievances, and global ambitions.